So, I just thought I'd do something very different to what I normally do. This is my secret origin of how I started this channel. So, I've just been looking, I've been on this channel for about 4.5 years doing my comics channel, but this wasn't the first time I was on YouTube. So, this channel went by a different name, and I can't even remember what the name was anymore. About for 2 years before then. And it's very, very different. I this is so shallow. I found out just by posting videos of me in outfits and stuff. Um, I could get lots of views. I ended up with like in a matter of what 6 months, 10,000. I had about 10,000 subscribers. But oh my God, I hated it. And I was just like, why am I doing this? Yeah, it's easy for getting views, and if it had carried on, I could have, gone up and up and up in subscribers. But I was doing content that I really hated. It was just like shallow, really shallow, and I thought this isn't me. It's that easy. Like I said, I could just post a 2-minute video, just me sitting there going, okay, why am I doing this? So I thought, right, I really need to. I love the idea of doing YouTube. I didn't even speak then because I was like really self-conscious of my voice and stuff. So honestly, I was just thinking, why? Well, I know now why people are viewing it, but we won't go down that route. So I want to do YouTube. I want to do something that I really like. So I should do one about books because I read books as well. Those are things about pictures. Should do one about films, music. What should I do? But no, what do I really, really, really enjoy about comics? And at the time, I think I didn't really follow many comics channels then on YouTube. There was Name and Condition, what I knew about. And there's one or two others, but so we talk about 5 years ago. I thought, oh, okay. So I was just mulling it over for months. And then I was at a gig, as you do. Can't remember what the band was, but that was my first. I think that was my first video I posted on YouTube, just of me and the gig. And I said, "Think about starting a channel, comics channel." And it's just I was just having a drink of my alcoholic beverage, and thought, "Yeah, I'll do about comics because I love comics." My first grown-up comic was when I was 6, or yeah, 6. Is a British reprint of a Marvel black and white comic so that'd be 1976, 77, something like that. There you go, work out my age. And I was far too young for it, but I was obsessed with Planet of the Apes. I used to put cotton wool in my mouth, put a balaclava on my head, and my dad had these big hiking socks what I used to put on my feet, and he used to put woolly gloves on my hands. I was an ape. So God bless my parents, but why did they do this at the same time? They let me go out with my balaclava on, cotton wool in my mouth, my gloves on, and my woolly socks, being an ape, walking like this. So comics have been in my DNA because before then, in Britain they used to do reprints in the early 70s of Disney comics and also things like really old strips of Abbott and Costello and that lot. And so I've always, from basically when I could like form sentences and read a bit, I've always had comics in my life, the Beano, Dandy, and obviously then from Planet of the Apes, my comic in the 70s and 80s, it was a fantastic time for comics. You didn't need a comic shop. In the UK, if you were lucky like I was, you had a newsagent down the road, and you could get your British comics, which most newsagents could do, like Battle, Warlord, Victor, Jackie, Blue Jeans if you're a girl, and so on and so on. But mine had a spinner rack, one of those what everybody envies and wants nowadays. I wish I could go back in time and steal it. And they used to get American comics in, and it was potluck what you could get because obviously um, it wasn't the same kind of distribution as what you had now. But I remember, so I didn't. I think that's the difference between my generation of comic readers and then today's generation of comic readers. You never really read a comic from the start when you were growing, when you were a kid in the 70s and 80s, or even the 60s. But wasn't a kid and I wasn't around. I was a sperm and an egg. There you go. You've learned how reproduction works, and birds and bees are involved as well. But yeah, you never really bothered with the idea of starting from ground zero. You just jumped in and worked out for yourself because unless you were looking to find like a second-hand shop that had the issues, that was it. You just made up the story. Sometimes what you made up about the story was better than what's actually in the story, especially with some of the writing in the 70s. Um, so with the spinner rack, there was an assortment, but you weren't guaranteed to get the same types of month after month after month. I remember one of my most treasured comics from that period of the early 70s was Plop, which had a Basil Wolfson comic cover on. I had no idea who Basil Wolfson was back then. It was like DC's version of, well, DC kind of owned Mad as well, but it's like Mad but weird. It's like this, and again, I don't know how I was able to buy it. So that made my eyes think, wow, okay, you can have humor, but you can have weird humor. And obviously, I also there's also like sci-fi stuff and that lot and superheroes. I've always um, been interested in comics that aren't like A-list comics. So I remember one of my favorite comics back then. I think in the last few issues was Claw the Unconquered, which was about this guy with this claw on his hand. It was an old DC one. And of course, Tales of the Unexpected, House of Secrets. What was there's one called Space Warps, something like that. And so I was all I and again, there were random issues, and you just read them to death. You read them and read them and read them. And of course, I got my British comics at the same time as well. But like I said, I was really lucky, and I was extremely lucky because my parents were religious. I don't think I'd ever say this, but say that would normally be lucky, but they were extremely religious. And my dad got a Dixon's television. And with his religious guilt, he had, oh, I can't do this anymore. The devil's tempted me, and he threw the TV out of the window, so it smashed on the floor. And so, because he couldn't control his addiction to the TV, we did without TV as well. So, for about until we lived in Blackburn originally. So, while we were in Blackburn, we had no TV for about 6 years, and I didn't miss it. I used to go to my friends. If I wanted to watch some children's programs, I'd just go to his house. I'd watch them, and I'd be happy. But because my mum was right with go with what my dad did, she gave us extra money for comics. So unlike some people, like Geeky on Hog says, he had to choose between one or two. No, I had about five, six each week, which was fantastic. Honestly, get religious parents who get rapid with girls, and you get more comics. So I was introduced to stuff like again the spinner rack, magical spinner rack at my comic shop, at my newsagents, which I guess in America you call them a drugstore. Um, I was introduced to things like Mad as well. So that's when I first encountered Sergio Aragones and Spy versus Spy, stuff like that. Obviously used to do the folding of the back. And they also had like these I won an art, I'm jumping all over the place here. When I was 10 at school, I won an art competition. And it was a Church of England school, so the vicar gave me a voucher and I bought this Mad book from the newsagents because I got and it's all is it Don I always get his name wrong. Don Martin? Oh, so it's all these gag strips. I thought it was wonderful. Um, yeah. So, and then we had a. I'm really going on the deep dive here. Then we had a holiday home. When I say holiday home, it's like a shed at the top of Pendle Hill, which is where the witches came from in Lancashire. Right at the top hill, and right at the bottom, there's like this farm shop. In the farm shop, they had a spinner rack, and they sold black and white Marvel magazines, and that's when. So we're talking again, mid 70s. That's when I was introduced to those wonderful, wonderful. I can spell it now. Black and white magazines. So I got Conan, I got the Deadly Hands of Kung Fu, I got Oh, there's another one. What was it? There was another one that I got. I can't remember, but there's a few because Marvel Premiere or something like that. So again, I was introduced to more different types of comics because again, these were ones that weren't the mainstream. I like, don't get me wrong, I enjoyed superheroes. So you used to get, but my mainstream superhero ones, so you used to get the black and white reprints of Marvel. So you used to get Titans, Mighty World of Marvel, and that lot, which basically cherry picked um, different Marvel strips. Um, so from American ones, I think that's why I've always been a DC fan because my American ones, I used to get DC because you couldn't get like the British. It wasn't in the seventies. There was no British reprints of of DC, whereas Marvel was you could get it anywhere. Um, yeah, so that was another way of thinking. Oh, there's different types of comics, and then we used to go on holidays as well to places like the seaside, it's Blackpool and places like that. And if you go to a seaside in the UK, especially in the 70s and 80s, there used to be pier shops if you go on the pier where you could get little knickknacks. And there was they always had comics, but they weren't your standard comics. One's what they call Alan Class comics, which, because they had no sell by date, they could keep them in forever. And Alan Class used to compile these like 60, I've mentioned this before, 600 page comics, which black and white reprints of like old Thunder Agents, um, Archie Red label, that was like the superhero line from Archie. Um, Marvel pre superheroes, so it'd be like the Steve Ditko, Jack Kirby horror stuff. You'd also have all some of those smaller one companies as well, and some early DC as well. And they'd all been mashed together. They never told you who they were buying that lot. So that's where I got exposed to like the more weirder side of early comics. I used to devour those. Um, like I said, because they're dirt cheap and you got loads of pages. So that was always the highlight from our holidays. And I also remember another thing. I've always liked big comics. I cannot lie. There was also that's when I first discovered when I was on holidays the Treasury editions. Oh my god, that blew my mind. And I used to other people bought toys and all. I saved my pennies for these big Treasury edition comics. And I've got a fond memory. It was one that I got. I think it was the Defenders, if I remember rightly. Um, and also Marvel did some. I'm jumping all over again, like I said. Marvel did these small, compact pocket books, which in the late 70s and 80s what I devoured, which introduced me to more they had the Tomb of Dracula strips in it, which like a digest sized comic with about again 60 pages or something like that. So I got Tomb of Dracula through that. They had the sci-fi one, which had Micronauts and Battlestar Galactica. They had Fantastic Four and other ones like that. So again, I was being introduced to more stuff, and DC did some called the Blue Ribbon, which again were the same compact ones, but these were in full colour. That's where I first got introduced to the Legion of Superheroes, and that this was in the late 70s, and that's when I fell in love with the Legion of Superheroes. So, and obviously, then we moved to Manchester. So we moved to Manchester in the early 80s. When I was that, because it was Manchester, it was bigger, so there's more shops selling more unusual stuff. Um, and in Manchester, in WH Smith, which was the big newsagents in the UK, they had much more variety of American comics. That's where I encountered Brew for the first time. That's where I got my first epic illustration. I was far too young ago. I was about 11 when I picked that up. And also in Manchester, there was this shop on the corner, what you just like a where you could, where you could get your sweets or cigarettes and stuff from. But he also had magazines. That's where I got Heavy Metal from. Again, far too young for it. I got my first Fabulous Freak Brothers from that. No, actually, I tell a lie. It was Fat Freddy's Cat where I got that. So I was introduced to Underground Comics at 12. And also they had other American ones that you couldn't get normally, like um, some uh, some PC ones, which were things like Destroyer Duck and comics like that. And from there, I then realised I can't remember how. I think I read about it in it might have been in a I think it might have been in Mighty World Marvel when it went monthly. There's an advert for a shop called Odyssey 7, which was in Manchester. I had not got a clue where it was because Manchester was big and scary when you were a young kid. So I showed my brother and said, "Oh, I think I know where that is." So we made a pilgrimage because my brother was into comics as well, and it was all the way down near the university. It's moved now. It's now called, obviously, it's now Forbidden Planet, but back then it's called Odyssey 7. And I remember the paper, the bags had like this brilliant illustration of Elric on it. Oh my God, that blew my mind. This was like, what, 83, 84, 1983, 84? That opened my eyes to, honestly, I think I had my first sexual awakening there because it's more like comics. And there's so many. That's where I discovered my first graphic novel, and that was an Eclipse one. I think that might have been Detective Ink, so Ink, or it could have been Sable. Um, and I just realised there's more comics than just Marvel and DC. And I discovered there's other shops. There's a second-hand one called Paramount, where it was half porn and half comics. So obviously, I was too scared to go in the porn section, so I used to get my comics, and that's where I discovered First Comics and Eclipse. And so that's a very long-winded way of saying comics have always been on been in my life. So from the age of 6 to now, I've always read comics. Obviously, 2000 AD was a left a huge impression. I got it from Prog One. I had an on-off relationship. It's been more on than off. So that is the big love of my life when it comes to comics. But comics have always been in my blood. So I thought, so that's when I had this realization. I'll do a channel on comics. And then I got scared. I was like, but I'm trans. And I thought, I, and I was looking, you type in comics on YouTube and it showed all these comic channels. So there's nobody else like me doing comic channels. Oh shit. Ah. So I thought, I was terrified. I was terrified because I was going to be speaking. This is going to be the first video that we're speaking, and I've got a real. Obviously, when you're trans, you have a lot of issues with like your voice doesn't match how it is in your head. Um, so here are my voice. This is basically stripping the curtains right back. When I record a video, I can't look at it for a few days because I don't like how I look a lot of the time. It takes my brain to stop judging myself so harshly and think, oh, I look okay, I'm okay. So I have issues with how I look when I film a video. Oh, I'm very hypercritical of myself. I hate my voice. It's camp as fuck. And it's not feminine enough for me to feel comfortable with. Well, in my head, anyway. So I had a lot of things to contend with personal wise. And so I remember my first video, and it's like, "Hey, my name's Mandy. I'm a geek," and it's like, so that became a name, Mandy's Geek. So what I did, I stopped my original account. I kept my account open and changed the name, and it was a weird period because um, I had all these followers who were following me for different reasons. Because, like I said, my other channel used to be more like a fashion and a looks kind of channel, and it was just great seeing all these followers. I went from what it was, like I said, it was in the thousands, about 10,000 or something ridiculous like that, and just dropping like flies. It got down to about 400, 300, something like that. So I posted my first video, and it seemed okay, but then the comments came in. You're a freak. Ugh, that's a bloke. Ugh, blah blah blah. All these real. I wasn't tough enough by then to handle it, because like I said, this is my first time being my authentic self, talk about something that I love with a passion, and I was expecting some negativity, but it just seems to be this barrage of hate, transphobia, and these proper like incel kind of like comments. So I went quiet for a bit. I thought, fuck it, I'm gonna soldier on. So this carried on for about 4 or 5 months, where I was getting all these comments, but soon the negative comments got less and less. Then suddenly, some people started interacting with me, and I think some people realized, oh, she's talking about comics. She actually does know her stuff about comics, and that gave me the boost what I needed. So then I started really focused on what I really do like about comics, and I started doing more specialized videos, like doing deep dives and recommending stuff. And then the another milestone was, I'm just going to pause it while I go and get a drink. Oh, that's my electrolytes and me. Yeah, so another turning point was Threads, comic Threads in particular. If you're not on there and you love comics, go on there. The comics community on Threads is amazing. This exposed me to, not exposed me, but this introduced me to more other people who were passionate about comics. And from there, I formed friendships with people who had some YouTube channels. And before by then, obviously, we're talking like a year. By then, about a year or so had passed since I started my channel. So that's where I got to know people like Geeky Hog, Comics Patrol, or DC Patrol, as it was called back then. And he just started doing his videos. Geeky Hog, I think he might have started a bit after me, actually. God, I'm one of the OGs. But that just gave me that support, and because that gave me that support what I needed, and because they was they started leaving comments on mine through knowing each other on Threads, and that starts like a roll on and a roll on effect where I'd comment on their channels, they comment on mine. People who were following their channels started following my channels, and vice versa. And so I went from there's one. I think when I first started, I literally had about 200 people, if that. And like I said, a lot of them dropped off after, because like I said, they were just stragglers from my old channel. So then I started building up, and I stagnated at about 700 for about a year. And I was getting quite despondent. For I was trying all types of stuff. I felt like it was just really pouring my heart into the channel, and it's just dropping. For and I didn't want to do gimmicks. You know, I had no sponsorships. I had nothing like that. I didn't reach out. I tried reaching out to 2000 AD and that fell down. Got a lovely reply from them, but I thought, yeah, I'm never going to get sponsorship. So why am I trying to do it? And for a long time, I was doing like comic reviews and that a lot, like other channels were. And again, it was killing the enjoyment I was having from reading weekly comics because I was hurrying up to read them so I could post a video every Saturday with all the comics I read. And I was getting loads of comics by then, and it was like that was a hard slog. I just thought, why am I killing myself to do that? Because I was just desperate to get the ratings up. And I thought, why am I desperate to get the ratings up? So about a year ago, I thought, fuck this. I used to do like black and white. I was trying to be artsy. I had black and white. I always had like black and white and black and white thumbnail from each episode. So I'd stand out. What? Ooh. So I really just took a step back and reassess what I wanted to do. But right, I'm just going to focus on stuff I want to see on my channel. Stop trying to copy everybody else, because more power to people who enjoy doing reviews, weekly reviews. That's not me. I love recommending stuff what's hard to find. I love recommending books what I get pleasure from, or stuff or doing deep dives of stuff what people might not be familiar with. I love turning people onto new stuff or stuff what's been around for years, but people have never been aware of it. So I thought, right, I'm going to focus on that, and let's try and make my channel look as best as it can in the thumbnail. So I searched around and found this really good editing tool for my phone, and I went vividly in colour with my thumbnails, and I messed about with lettering and stuff, all different types of editing techniques, and I just upped my game with what I could do with that. And it paid dividends. I don't do this financially. I don't get any money at all from my channel. But the interactions increased. I have more feedback with people, have more people naturally following me. I rarely ever promote my channel because I've mentioned this before. I'm English. We don't like doing that. We're not American. We're not hey bravado or anything like that. I'm very self-effacing. If I'm going to tease anybody, I'll tease myself. Put it that way. But by not worrying about it, it had a positive effect. People started watching my channel, and it went from 700, and then it went to 800, went to 900, and it stayed up for a while, and then it once it got to 1,000, that's when it changed. I'm now at 1,046, I think it is, and I don't worry about it. I don't. But it's lovely to see suddenly I end up with two or three new followers in a week. And think, wow, where did these come from? And I always try to reply to people because I don't like that attitude of just posting videos out. People leave the comments and you don't reply because I think, do you think you're high? Somebody's made an effort to watch your video and comment on it. Feedback. Give them feedback. At least just give them a thumbs up at the most if you don't even know how to reply. Just acknowledge that somebody's messaged you. So that's what I try and do. Try and make it very, very personal and very interactive. I started the Discord, which is very small. I've only got about 7, 8 people on my Discord. If you want to join, do let me know. So that's where I'm at now. But yeah, it was a long journey to get here. I had a lot of, like I said, personal things to battle with. It's hard when you're not, when you're a bit like a square peg in a round hole, where there's 95% of people who do comics YouTube are straight white guys. I'm not. I'm not that demographic. And I do veer a lot towards creators who like that's. I think that's why I like the Comics Pals because the Hispanic, the black, the very liberal. But I've had to change my attitude as well. Not everybody who's white is straight are dickheads. That's just because some comics YouTuber like that. A lot of them aren't. Neiman's not. Geeko Hog's not. Comics Troll not, and loads of others who I've familiarised myself with. So I have my own prejudices to combat, but like I said, I also had to battle with other people's prejudices. And what has been refreshing is people now follow my channel and don't even care about me, which is what I want. They just care about the content, which is what I want. That's what I want my channel to be. So that's where it's at. And that was really waffly, wasn't it? But I hope you enjoyed that. That's my secret origin, my little birthday extra for you, even though it's not my birthday yet. I've got Friday is old day. Okay. Bye.